What's up guys, Matt back again with another video, and today we're going to be talking about my most disappointing figures from 2023. Before we dive into the video, please remember to subscribe and hit the bell, like the video, comment your thoughts down below for us to discuss, follow me on my socials, and consider becoming a YouTube member to enter into our monthly giveaways and Discord server so our community can help you on your Dragon Ball figure collecting journey. So before we start with the actual ranking of this top 10 video, I do want to just explain a little bit about the title and the concept and my thought process behind this video. So a lot of people asked me, hey, are you going to do a top 10 worst figures of 2023? And you know what? I decided to do something like that, but when I started making my original list, it just really came out to be a few different Crane figures and maybe a couple of Ichiban Kuji figures. So I thought it would be more interesting for me to talk about something that I think resonates a lot more with me and that I think would be a little more interesting than seeing a bunch of history box figures on this list, because let's be real, that's probably what it would end up being. But I thought it would be more interesting for me to talk about figures that disappointed me. So maybe figures that I was really looking forward to and they ended up not being quite what I expected, or they just were straight up bad. So that's kind of the concept behind this list, and I think the entire list is Masterly's Ichiban Kuji figures. So without further ado, let's pop onto the screen right now and start ranking this list. All right, coming in at number 10 is probably something that might upset a few of you, but I'm going to put at number 10, as soon as I can find him on this hodgepodge of different characters. Holy crap. Here he is. I'm going to put the last one prize, Beast Gohan Beast from Dragon Ball versus Omnibus Beast. So the reason I'm putting him in 10th, the lowest of the most disappointing, is mostly because of how he came out, and a lot of it has to do with his face. So the figure itself is pretty good, but I think this was something a lot of people were excited about and looking forward to. It was our first Masterly / Ichiban Kuji of Gohan Beast, and he was in a really awesome pose doing his special beam cannon. Now, when we first saw the images that they showed off of the figure when they first revealed the set, he looked amazing. Everything about it was something that I think people could get on board with. Some people were upset that the last one prize was the better version, the obvious better version that we weren't going to get for overseas. But upon release, I noticed that his face was off. Some of the shading on the skin and his gi was not as good as I expected. It was there, but just wasn't as good as I expected. But really, it was his likeness, and that really makes or breaks a figure for me personally. You can see right here on the screen the final production images of the figure, so pretty much what he looks like in person, and the original preview of the figure. And usually we expect that the initial, beta or whatever you want to call them, production images of the figure before release, we expect that they're going to get better when the figure is finally done and coming out, which usually happens. But this is the rare case where a figure is revealed, we get excited, and when he comes out, he's just not quite as good as he should have been. There were just some details on his face that were missing. His eyes look kind of weird, and I have noticed that some people have less QC issues than I did, but the mouth on mine was very off, and he just lacked a lot of details. He just looks unfinished in the face, I think is the best way to describe it. I don't hate the figure. It just should have been like a 5 out of 5. This should have been in my top 5 figures of 2023. And if you guys haven't seen my top 10 figures of 2023, you can watch that video in the card above. But he just didn't really come out the way I was expecting. So he's not the worst, and he's not bad at all. He's just really disappointing, and I think he's fair to put at the bottom of this list. Let's move on though and change gears. There was another figure in that same set that I felt was a little more disappointing, and to me, that was the base Gotenks. So I'm not going to put the Super Saiyan Gotenks, but you can kind of put both of them here, though the Super Saiyan Gotenks is a little bit better just because he looks very true to his source, and I like that a lot. Now, this one is obviously just a blatant reskin. They didn't change anything other than the color of his hair. That's really it, just the color of his hair. There's no change on the shading, the details, the the pose, nothing changes on the figure other than his hair, which, you know, we've all talked about how we're kind of upset that Bandai kind of just always does this palette swap thing with a lot of the figures. And when it's within the same set, man, that's just really annoying. So it would have been nice if they took in like some changes, like maybe his arms at the very least, and maybe change the expression on his face to a more serious or angry look, just like when he first appears in the anime in his base form. So that would have been way more acceptable in my opinion. And the other big thing about this figure, which the Super Saiyan Gotenks also has an issue with, is that they fall over all the time on my shelf, both of them. And I don't know if I'm the only one. Let me know in the comments if you have one of these figures and have the same issue, but their supports are so bad and they just constantly fall over all the time. I have to have them leaning against each other and other figures on the shelf in order for them to not fall over. But if the slightest touch on the shelf happens, they fall over. So that's definitely a QC issue with the quality of the sculpt, but I think that's a widespread one since I got two with the same issue. But yeah, not a bad figure. I think he looks good, good size, obviously a little overpriced for the size that you're getting, even if it's a Masterlies, but I still think that it could have been done better. They could have just done a little bit extra to make him different enough and justify his inclusion in the same Ichiban Kuji. But let's keep moving on. We have another figure that I think falls into a lot of the same complaints as the Gotenks at number 7, but kind of a bit worse in my opinion, and that is the Potential Unleashed Piccolo from Ichiban Kuji Dragon Ball vs. Omnibus Great. It was just kind of disappointing to see another Potential Unleashed Piccolo in the Omnibus after his first appearance in this form. So we had Omnibus Ultra in 2022, which included a Super Saiyan Gohan, which was recycling the Ultimate Gohan's body for the most part, and a Potential Unleashed Piccolo, which was recycling the legs of the Superhero Piccolo, which came out in the same year. So that's fine, you know, if you're recycling legs and you change enough about the rest of the figure, it's fine. He's still pretty similar, that Omnibus Ultra Piccolo, but his torso is a bit bigger and he has the different details and coloring in that form, so I'm okay with that. But then they just redid it again, changed a couple of arms, and then pushed his head to the side. Like, super lazy recycle in the very next Omnibus. So that's just really lazy and disappointing in my opinion. I guess you can just pick which one you think is your favorite, but it just seemed like a waste of a slot in an Ichiban Kuji set, and I don't think a lot of people were that interested in another Potential Unleashed Piccolo. In this form in general, a lot of people don't even realize that Piccolo had 2 new forms in Superhero. It just isn't that different than his regular form. So there's just a lot about this figure that I think rubs people the wrong way. Just really disappointing. I don't think the figure is bad. I think the quality and everything is there. But when you look at it in context, it's coming out in the next Omnibus, just what? It was October, and then 1, 2, 3 months later, you get another Potential Unleashed Piccolo. That's really disappointing, man. Really takes a lot of the fun out of the hobby. So I really wish they hadn't done that. And, you know, I think I like the Omnibus Ultra one a little bit better anyways, but who knows? It is what it is. But now let's move on to a figure that I think has a little more of a critical issue in regards to the quality of the figure, and that is number 7 at Kaio Ken Goku. Man, I was looking forward to this figure, believe it or not, more than any other figure in the Ginyu Force Ichiban Kuji. I love Kaio Ken. I think it's such an awesome looking form, but this figure just did not have a lot of the Ichiban Kuji quality that I'm used to seeing. So when I look at Kaio Ken, we can use the Super Decisive Battle Kaio Ken ×3 Goku, for example. The shading on that figure is excellent. It's one of the best Goku figures you can get. There's so many details from his muscles, the sculpt, his likeness, and the shading, and all that great stuff. So this Goku definitely has a great likeness, cool sculpt. There's a lot about it that's good, but it really comes down to that shading. And I've talked about this in my Matchmakers video recently with the Kaio Ken Goku and Vegeta. If you're going to do Kaio Ken, you have to go all out with the shading. And I don't think there's like any shading on this figure. If there is, It's extremely subtle. He just kind of looks pink, and that's very disappointing. You know, you see him do this in the anime, and he's just lit up, has a lot of different lighting and effects on him. And if you're going to do Kaio Ken on a figure, you have to do that, especially if you're an Ichiban Kuji. So the figure really came out a little flat for me. I like a lot about it, but that shading just pulls so much out of it, and it doesn't make it as great of a figure that it could have been. So that's super disappointing. I wish they would have gone the full mile to paint this figure the way that he should have been, but it is what it is. He's at number 7. Number 6, I think a lot of people were disappointed with this figure, and I probably don't have to say why, but I will. At number 6, we're going to put King Cold from Dragon Ball vs. Omnibus Great. Man, Omnibus Great was not that great. I love that Mecha Frieza and King Cold are in that set, and you know, we got Super Saiyan Goku from Grade 3 and Super Saiyan Gohan from the Room of Spirit and Time when he turns into a Super Saiyan. Like, all great things. And King Cold was one that I think a lot of people were super excited for until they saw his height. And this should have been a Masterly's Extra. He should have been at least as tall as the Final Form Cooler. If this figure had 2 more inches at the very least, maybe not quite as tall as Cooler, but if he just had 2 to 4 inches, he would have been one of the greatest figures this year. The quality is amazing. The figure looks fantastic, from his cape, his likeness, the colors. They just nailed all that out of the park, but man, he looks so awkward when you put him next to particular characters on your shelf. Even next to the Gokus on my shelf, which you can maybe see in the shot. You probably can't, but he's on my Android shelf. He's next to a couple of Yardrat Gokus, and they're like the same height, and that just doesn't make any sense. I don't need them to scale 1-to-1 with the anime. They don't need to be 100% the same. He doesn't have to tower above them like in the anime, but he needs to be taller than Goku at a recognizable margin. He should have been so much better. I love this figure a lot, man. And I was a little soft on it when I was reviewing it earlier in the year. But after some time and thinking about it and being more fair and critical, he should have been taller. I like the figure, but he really disappointed me because he should have been a Masterly's Extra. So that is that. Let's move on. Believe it or not, I was disappointed quite a bit more. And this is going to kind of be like a tie. So I'm going to put both of these in here, and I think it'll make sense as to why. And it's going to be the Goku vs. Frieza Prize A, but also the Goku vs. Frieza Last One Prize from Ichiban Kuji Battle on Planet Namek. So I have grown to like these figures a little bit more over time, but they were probably the most disappointing aspect of that Ichiban Kuji. So this is such an iconic manga panel. It's one of my absolute favorites in all of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. Just the stare down between Goku and Frieza before they start their fight. This isn't actually in the anime or in the actual chapter. It's a cover panel before the chapter starts, and it just looks so cool. You know, just seeing the difference in size between Goku and Frieza is awesome. But I don't know why they decided to make Prize A, pretty solid figures, but with zero shading. There's no shading at all on these figures. I think in my review, I was a little nice and I said I think there's subtle shading, but the more I've looked at them, the more I realize there's no shading. There's no shading at all on Prize A, and this is an Ichiban Kuji. That's unacceptable. And to only put the shading and details on the Last One Prize is really aggravating. Like, why would you only put shading on the Last One Prize? I think it's fine if you go and do the manga colors for your Last One Prize version. Maybe add some more to justify it being a Last One Prize, but that being the only place where you put that detail, every Kuji figure should have shading. Every single Ichiban Kuji. It's a premium figure. They all deserve to have great shading on them. So the sculpt and everything's cool. I think Frieza's likeness is a little bit off too. It's not perfect, but he does kind of look a little goofy. Goku doesn't look as bad, but he also kind of looks somewhat goofy in the face. I would probably go back and redo my review to give them both a 3 out of 5 in the likeness if I haven't done that already. There is a lot to love. The pose, how they pair together, Goku's hair sculpt. I like the details on the last one prize versions because of the shading and everything, but they should have been so much better, and it should have just been one, really. That's more of a knock on the Ichiban Kuji, but both of these figures just really disappointed me. I was hoping that they'd be a little bit better, and they just weren't. I think I might have just been excited because I was recollecting again, and this was one of the first sets that I got coming back into collecting, so I was probably really nice to them when they came out, but over time, I've just been like, man, they should have been so much better. But, yep, I found them to be quite disappointing, but ooh, I think we can all agree that Super Saiyan Goku from Dragon Ball vs. Omnibus Brave was a pretty divisive figure. I absolutely love Goku as a Super Saiyan during the fight with Frieza. I love how big they made him look and all that great stuff, his white fluffy hair at the time. And I think in Japan, this figure is ranked pretty high with collectors, like they love it. And I have softened up on it over time. I've liked it more over time, but it still disappointed the crap out of me and still disappoints the crap out of me. The colors are pretty muted. His hair looks more gray than that bright, fluffy white. Like, his hair should look closer to like the Super Vegeta that's coming in Omnibus Amazing this year. But it doesn't. It's too muted, and I wish it looked a lot better. And his face doesn't look terrible, but something's off about it. His nose just seems a little too big, and the sculpt is so sloppy. You can see pieces of his pants like pieced together, which looks very odd. And the nipple, we all gonna talk about that. It's not a big deal to me. The nipple is not a big deal to me, but his proportions and everything look very weird, and the way that his sculpt is just kind of done is very odd. There's so much about this figure that should have been one of the greatest of all time, but the sculptor decided to do kind of his own creative take on this version of Goku, and I kind of wish he hadn't. He's very good at sculpting characters that are like monsters, like Cell Max and the Orange Piccolo from Omnibus Brave, but with this one, yeah, his style really doesn't fit Super Saiyan Goku, so it was so disappointing. A lot of people were excited for this, and I gave a very honest review on it, and I wanted to love this figure, and I can't. Like I said, I've softened on it, but it's just not as good as it should have been. But let's move on. Number 3, we're in the top 3 now. I would say that the top 3 in this list might be objectively bad, but let's move on. This might be a little surprising to people, but I'm going to put the last one prize, Frieza, from Dragon Ball EX Fear of Frieza, as one of the worst in this set. And oh man, so mine had a major QC issue where they made his eyes too big. You can even see like one of the sculpt bottom of his eyes cutting off the paint of his eyes because the eyes were painted too low. Major QC issue. It makes him look so ugly. But the fact of the matter is that this is the last one prize, and literally all they did is they were supposed to make his eyes, I think, like a little lower or maybe a little higher. I forget which one. I think his chin is either a little elevated or lowered as a last one prize, and his eyes are bigger or smaller as the last one prize. I wouldn't know because mine has a major QC issue. But then on top of that, all they do is just like finger. His finger goes up. What a waste of a last one prize. Dragon Ball EX has had a terrible history of this. The year before 2023, we got the Fear of Androids, and they did the same thing with Android 16, where they just made his eyes look in a different direction, and they slapped a sticker on his chest. Wow, so amazing and creative. We have had other Dragon Ball EX sets do things a little more creatively, like, Goku has a different colored gi, or they have Goku without the turban and no umbrella, and his arm is in a different place for like the upcoming EX Kuji. And this is just the laziest thing, one of the laziest things I've ever seen them do, and it just brings the figure down. I have a personal bias and a vendetta against this Frieza just because of how badly mine came out. He should have been one of the best figures, and frankly, he's not. He's a lazy last one prize, and I freaking hate it. This year, I think, while it may be one of the best years for Ichiban Kuji, was one of the worst years for last one prizes. And I think you'll see that because In number 2, we have another last one prize, and it is the Orange Piccolo from Omnibus Brave. So I think the Orange Piccolo from Omnibus Brave is pretty cool. The Prize B version is pretty awesome. He's big. He's pretty much a Master Lee's extra. He has those monstrous details that I think the sculptor's name is Irukawa or Irukua. And he lends himself very well to a character like Orange Piccolo, who's big and monstrous and alien-like. So he's got really cool details, but then the last one prize, they just make his pants and his shoes glossy, and it just looks terrible. It comes off as super cheap. It really brings the figure down. It's extremely distracting from the details of the rest of the figure, and I wish I could hide it. I mean, I have it on my shelves here on like an extra shelf of things that I don't use, I think. But oof, it is just so bad. I hate it so much. And again, it's another case of the last one prize being something so lazy. So lazy. It's just the same figure and they glossed up his pants and shoes. That's just a terrible choice, and I wish and hope that Bandai is stopping that, because, you know, this year we're getting very unique last one prizes, which is cool. I hope they keep that up. But this is just awful. I really hated those glossy pants. It's really the one thing that destroys this last one prize, and it being a last one prize is so lazy. But now we are bringing out possibly the most disappointing figure, and definitely the worst figure that I've opened in 2023 within Ichiban Kuji. And I don't know if you guys can guess it, but here he is. It is the last one prize from Dragon Ball vs. Omnibus Great, and it is Full Power Perfect Cell. Wow. This figure is gross. He has no shading. He's a last one prize with no shading. His likeness is awful, especially when you compare him to the manga. Man, and just like the quality, like it looks super sloppy with how they painted the black spots all over his body. I hate this thing. We needed a full power cell, which is because, you know, we don't have one of those forms, but man, I hope they do another one day, maybe one from his fight with Gohan, because this is the one from his fight with Trunks, and it's just so bad. He looks just awful in the face, and he's just not fun to look at. And for a last one prize, it's just unacceptable, especially the paint and shading area. This one's not worth a last one prize, price. And really, Bandai needs to do better, and hopefully they redo Full Power Cell in the future, because this one is just awful, absolutely terrible, and definitely my most disappointing figure of 2023. But guys, let me know your thoughts on this list. Do you agree with me? Would you make things a little bit differently? And please let me know some of the most disappointing figures that you've opened this year, or some of the worst figures that you've opened up this year. But until the next video, guys, I will see you all later.